William Del Biaggio quickly became the biggest fraud in hockey history when he decided that he was going to lie about his financial earnings just to obtain ownership to the rights of an NHL franchise. This guy was so obsessed with the possibility of owning his own organization that he went to extreme lengths to make it happen. Del Biaggio was a frequent high roller that just so happened to be good friends with another hockey legend, Mario Lemieux. He decided that he was going to get involved in a hockey organization and purchased a 2% stake in the San Jose Sharks. The investment wasn't enough for him, so he jumped into a cluster of other investments in property and other organizations. He joined an investment group alongside Lemieux and Luc Robitaille to get to the Omaha Lancers in Nebraska, a minor league team. The three of them happened to get along quite well, with records indicating that Biaggio got a $2 million real estate investment fund with Robitaille, and he also got a $2 million mansion in Santa Monica with Lemieux. Problem is that he was allegedly deep into debt before wanting to move into the hockey world. As I mentioned earlier, he was a frequent high roller who wouldn't shy away from traveling over to Las Vegas. During these trips, he accumulated a lot of gambling debt, with some sources claiming that the debt ballooned to over $4 million. So, already, he was in trouble financially. But instead of wanting to settle that financial issue first, he set sights on a new idea, and that goal just randomly came to him. The close connections he had with a few legendary hockey players had him wanting to get a bigger chunk out of a team. The problem was that he simply didn't have the money necessary to pull off a larger move like that. So he went into illegal monetary actions to pursue the goal of his. See, this wasn't the easiest move in the world, and he had to be smart about it. The first step was to contact David Cashion, a stockbroker who was financially strapped himself, who also happened to owe Biaggio a couple $1 million. He used him to get account statements from other wealthy clients that displayed millions of dollars in stock holdings. He cut out the clients' names on those statements and put his own, so he could show the NHL that he meant business and deserves a shot at owning a franchise. These fake documents helped Biaggio obtain around $110 million worth of loans from multiple banks and other NHL owners who were going to help him into their circle. Craig Leopold of the Minnesota Wild was one of these owners who lent him money. He picked up so much money from other sources due to these documents that he eventually bought a controlling interest in the Nashville Predators. Unfortunately, it didn't last long, as his scheme was caught onto and everything turned upside down. When you think about it though, one could easily wonder how in the world he pulled off a move like this. With banks and other owners just not catching on, I mean, just reading out what he did seems like it would be easy to spot. As he took statements and replaced their names with his own, the plan seemed simple, yet it was unbelievably effective. It went on to show how unprepared the league and these banks were to face a threat of this magnitude back then. When he was finally figured out, Biaggio was ordered to pay back 8 separate banks and the 2 NHL owners that he borrowed money from. In total, the court ordered him to pay $47.5 million combined, which in today's money is about $68 million. It was revealed that Biaggio also took advantage of the bank he helped co-funded with his father 20 years prior to this crime. That bank was mentioned as one of the ones he took a loan from, called Heritage Bank of Commerce. When it comes to that property, Biaggio owed them $4.8 million. Merriman Curhan Ford Group was the establishment that employed David Cashion, the stockbroker that helped kickstart this entire plan into motion. The chief financial officer for Merriman, Henry Tang, said that this scam set them back a whopping amount of money. After they added up all of the legal fees it cost them, they were down $10 million and went from a staff of 188 employees all the way down to 85. And that's not even mentioning their share price plummeting either, which also dropped them $43.4 million in market capitalization. The simple fact that Biaggio was able to get away with a move like this initially made many to question the NHL himself. After all, they weren't exactly the ones that caught onto his scheme and stopped his ownership bad right in his tracks. They even authorized the sale at one point before figuring out that everything was falsified. One Toronto lawyer who worked alongside the NHL for many years came out and said, "What kind of due diligence did the NHL do on this? Typically, I would expect them to be much more thorough. This started with a whole debate on whether or not Biaggio's hockey friends helped speed up his review process because they wanted to bat for the bad guy. They claimed it had nothing to do with his popular friend and that he received no special treatment of any kind. For Biaggio, he felt as though he was on top of the world at one point before crashing right back down to earth. All it took was one bank to demand repayment for their loan to figure out that his account statements weren't hit, and other properties quickly followed suit and sent lawsuits in his direction. When all of this became public, the reporters quickly caught up with both Robitaille and Lemieux, and they asked them about their thoughts on the entire situation. Unfortunately, neither of them opted to give their thoughts on the situation, declining to comment entirely. Del Biaggio was tasked with paying back somewhere in the area of $67 billion in its entirety, looking at every single lawsuit he faced overall. Paying back the money he stole wasn't the only punishment he received from the trial faced in court. No, that would have allowed him to get off a little too easily. Instead, he was sentenced to 8 years in prison for bilking investors and banks alike. The sentence was originally set to be even longer, but Biaggio helped out investigators completely once he realized he had nowhere else to go in the scheme. He apologized repeatedly and cooperated enough to get him out of over 10 years in prison. The trial saw him file for bankruptcy as well, surrendering a significant amount of assets, which included the stake he purchased out of the Nashville Predators that he swindled his way into getting anyways. When given the opportunity to speak about what he did, Biaggio said, "I was blinded by pride and ego. Everyone makes mistakes. I will come back from this, and I refuse to let this define my life." Unfortunately, the Biaggio situation gets far deeper the longer you look into it. It didn't just affect the banks and the other owners. There were lawyers that were heavily impacted on top of that. One lawyer, by the name of Ronald Lafreniere, said that he invested a retirement nest egg alongside Biaggio during a scheme. The nest egg was reportedly $600,000 and admitted that he was so close to being able to retire completely from his job. When Biaggio was figured out, all of this money was taken away in a blink of an eye. Lafreniere since has said that he's been considering selling his home and that he won't be awarded enough compensation for what he lost in comparison to what the banks and other owners would eventually receive on their losses. All it really takes to feel the full impact of what was taken from Lafreniere came from one statement during the trial, when he said, "I was pretty close to retirement. It's been tough, and we don't know what we're gonna do." It wasn't just disappointment. There were other people who were fully involved that refused to accept his apology and didn't care whether he paid them back fully or not. The court judge, Charles Breyer, the man who ordered Biaggio to repay the loans he took, said this during the case: "A betrayal of trust is an awful thing. I don't care if you can pay back everything. This will never leave you, and that is the real punishment here." This probably hit home, with Biaggio previously stating that he didn't want this to be how he was remembered, and that he'd vowed to return all of the money to his rightful owners at some point down the line. It's a really difficult situation, but it's one that the NHL is probably thankful for now that they can look back on it. Biaggio was such a massive fraud. He took advantage of a system that got banks and other NHL owners in deep trouble rather easily. Since this has happened, the league has tightened up on the way they accept new owners into the league, making it harder for an owner to just get awarded an ownership stake, even if you have the money available to you. The people involved most likely wouldn't say that this was a blessing in disguise, though there were positive impacts made because of it. What do you think the NHL should do in future situations like this? Let us know in the comments down below. William Del Biaggio quickly became the biggest fraud in hockey history when he decided that he was going to lie about his financial earnings just to obtain ownership to the rights of an NHL franchise.